All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today, 3 Strategies to Retain Top Allied Health Talent Across Generations. My name is Stacy Jones, and I am your moderator today. I work on the marketing team at NHA, and I am really happy to be here. I think we have some really good information ready to share with you. Just to give you a little information of what to expect today. So we're going to try to spend about 50 minutes on sharing information with you. We have a lot of research, we have a lot of great perspective, and some tips to retain that top allied health talent. We're going to plan to spend roughly 10 minutes on Q&A at the end. If you wouldn't mind holding your questions and just chatting them in at the end when we get to that portion of the webinar. And then also, after the webinar, we're going to be sending out a link that is full of resources. So you'll see some of the things that we've talked about today. We're going to provide you with these webinar slides, so we would encourage you to share that link with your colleagues. We're also going to provide a recording of the webinar so you get all of the information that's behind the slides, and then we'll have some resources. We're going to very briefly talk about some product previews that are coming with NHA that really fit right into the crux of this topic, and we want to be able to give you more information if you need it. So we're not going to spend a ton of time on that today, but we are going to touch on some of that and give you more information at the end. Before we get started, let's do one more sound check. Can you either chat into the chat box or send us your favorite emoji so we can see if we have sound, if the majority of people on the line can hear us? Great. I'm seeing lots of good things. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. If there's anyone that cannot hear, I would encourage you to try to be sure and check your own mute settings and make sure that you are not on mute by accident. But it looks like the majority of our attendees can hear us, so we're going to keep moving. All right, so again, today we're going to talk about retaining your top allied health talent across the generations. So we all know that there is a shift happening in healthcare and in the workforce, and we want to be sure that we are keeping up with that shift and that we're able to help share some best practices and ways that you can continue to grow your own practices and keep your allied health at their very best. So I would love to introduce you to our speakers today. We have Jessica Langley, who's the Executive Director of Education and Advocacy for NHA. And what Jessica does is she focuses on understanding allied health trends, and she also keeps a pulse on the regulatory environment. She is a very strong partner with educators and employers, and she acts as an advisory role to help the allied health workforce deliver the best care possible. So Jessica is a great resource. Her background also includes being a clinician in the field, being a program director, so she has a wealth of knowledge, and we're really happy that she's able to share some of these things with you. We also have Nicole Stimpak, and Nicole is an editor of Physicians Practice. She has been in this capacity working in healthcare publications for the last 4 years. And if you don't know much about Physicians Practice, it's a digital publication. They have a viewership of over 300,000 viewers per month, and they serve an audience that has an average tenure in healthcare of 11 years. So another really great thing about Physicians Practice and kind of their mission, they're trying to offer practical advice and proven solutions for all of the real-world concerns and problems that medical practices are facing every day. So again, welcome to our guests, Jessica Langley and Nicole Stimpak. I think they have great insight and perspective to share with you today. So here's what our agenda looks like. We're going to give you an overview of the 2019 industry outlook, and this is really going to set the baseline for some research that NHA was a part of and give you a really good pulse on the landscape today. We're going to talk about generational trends that will impact your staff. And when we think about that, it's really from a patient experience perspective and then also from an employee perspective. And then we're going to talk about some retention strategies around that. Before we get started, we do want to understand our audience, and so we are going to set up a poll question. You should see something pop up on your screen. And the first question that we would like to ask is, where do you work? I'm going to give you about 15 seconds to submit your answer, and then we will share those answers with the group. All right. So hopefully you can see on your screen, we have a lot of educators on the line, which is really great and really important to us. I think one of the things that NHA prides itself on is connecting educators and connecting our employers together so that we create strong relationships and our education institutions can really support their programs with the needs of their local employer community. So thank you for joining us, educators. It really shows the investment that you have in your learners. And thank you also to our employers that are on the line. It really shows that you're also invested in making healthcare a really great place, not only to deliver care, but also to be a really great place to be employed. So we have another poll that we would like to ask. And this is also going to help us have a stronger conversation as we keep moving in this webinar. Our second poll is going to be, are you working in an environment that is team-based care? And team-based care can also be value-based care. It can also be customer or patient-centered care, those sorts of things. We just want to understand kind of what your working environment looks like. Give you a few more seconds. All right, and I'm going to share these results. And this is fantastic. So we're right at almost that 50-50 split with people working in that team-based care or patient-centered care environment and those who are not. All right, so we are going to keep moving. And I'm going to pass it over to Jessica Langley, and she's going to share the 2019 industry outlook.
Thank you, Stacy, and thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today. We're happy to have you, and let's go ahead and jump right in. So I want to give you a little bit of overview about the 2019 industry outlook. It's a part of NHA's annual publication called Asst. Asst is an industry journal that's developed to bring expert opinions and data to allied health professionals and the industry. Our 2019 outlook contains research that has been conducted by a third party in order for us to assess the opinions of employers concerning the professional outlook for certain professions in allied health. The survey was in market in March of 2019, and the respondents were not customers of NHA. It was actually conducted among professionals who are either employers of or who work at educational institutions that instruct allied health professionals. That gives you a little bit of overview as to where a lot of this data that you're going to see throughout the presentation came from. I think a key point to note is that many of the trends identified in Asst speak to the increasing value of allied health professionals, specifically in identifying their ability to provide greater access to care, expanded scope of services, and a more coordinated patient care team. So as you can see here, these statistics, based on the overall demand for these key occupations across the United States, came from U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it projects that all allied health professions will grow at rates that far exceed the U.S. average for all occupations. We know healthcare is changing, You can also see here that it remains a growing industry, with the healthcare occupations expected to increase around 18% through the year 2026. Outstandingly enough, that also represents about 2.4 million new jobs. So what a great industry either to be in or to be planning to enter in into the future. I love this next stat really well as a allied health professional myself, but of the total healthcare workforce, allied health professionals make up about 60% of that population, which is incredible. They've become an essential part of delivering healthcare services that aim to improve the quality of patient care that's provided, the patient's quality of life, and the patient's healthcare experience, and of course their overall wellness outcomes. I'm going to go ahead and bring in Nicole here, and Nicole, I would love if you could add any insight into the importance that you see of these allied health positions, especially in the ambulatory care space.
Thanks. So Physicians Practice actually recently conducted our own survey of staffing, and we found that among those with an open position, the number one staffing challenge is finding qualified staff, so finding people who can actually serve that role. So the need is greater than the supply. And staffing, and it just goes to highlight the fact that staffing is a really important process. You know, you want to find the right person for the job, not just a warm body. And, you know, staffing builds work culture and it contributes to the overall patient experience. So there's a lot at stake here.
Great, thank you. Now we're going to dig in a little bit to each of the individual's professions here, but not spend a ton of time on them. So as you saw in the previous slide, medical assistants, that field is growing the fastest at a pace of 29%. These growth ranges are seen between 1.5 to 3.5 times the average growth for all occupations. So take just a quick second, take a look at your state here on the map. Do you feel that it's in line with what you thought of the growth rate being? And as we can see, a majority of the states are experiencing that 3.5 times growth. We also believe this is due to the shortage of physicians and nurses, and that employers are starting to hire and train MAs, with each of their practices focusing on all healthcare professionals practicing to the top of their license or top of scope. Nicole, do you feel like this research or that this picture that is painted here is the same that physician practice is hearing?
Yeah, so in that survey that I referenced earlier, we asked for a breakdown of the number of positions the number of people in each position at the office. And there were some offices that only had, you know, 1 or 0 to 1 nurses or non-physician providers. But overwhelmingly, all practices have at least around 2 to 5 medical assistants, showing again that there's so much need out there for more allied health professionals.
Very exciting. Now to take a quick look at phlebotomists and their projected growth. Phlebotomists work in a variety of healthcare settings and provide support for practices, clinics, and hospitals, and are also experiencing high growth rates. So their diversity is certainly reflected in these statistics as well. Next is the pharmacy technician profession. It's also evolving rather quickly, with pharmacists becoming a more valued member of the care team. Research continues to show that when pharmacists spend more one-on-one time with patients, that better outcomes can be achieved. So while we want pharmacists to spend that additional time with patients, pharmacy technicians then also need to kind of step up and take on additional duties and responsibilities and provide more support. They are often the backbone of the pharmacy and play a major role in the impact of just the pharmacy's culture, their production, and helping balance that workload and increased efficiency. One of the next ones is medical administrative assistant. Oftentimes, we see medical assistants perform both administrative and clinical duties, or front and back office duties. The growth in this area continues to support the growth that we are seeing in ambulatory care settings, community hospitals or community clinics popping up, urgent cares, and such. With the needs for MAs to be multi-skilled, we often see these individuals come out and become certified in multiple disciplines, or stacking those credentials in things like billing and coding or phlebotomy as well. And lastly, billing and coding. Billing and coding specialists play an important role in practices as they work to achieve financial success. It's important for organizations to really invest in these people and these individuals to make sure that their knowledge and training is as up to date as possible in order to ensure that their practice is getting the most accurate and efficient reimbursements. Now transitioning a little bit to certification and why employers think that that is important. They feel certification provides value not only for professionals, but employers and ultimately patients. Today's health environment demands efficiency and efficacy from all of our employees at every level. And at NHA, we certainly believe that certification leads to better health care and better patient safety. Allied health professionals who can earn or achieve their credentials demonstrate their command of foundational and occupational knowledge. We also did additional research where employers also believe that certification can positively impact their institutions, and our data showed that approximately 78% of institutions or organizations that we surveyed encourage their employees to become certified. Nicole, what kind of data have you received or feedback around the value of certification that your readers see?
So, certification can be a point of pride for an organization, and it's a form of assurance that your staff is providing the best possible care that you can for your patients. So yes, it does cost resources, time, money, and effort to invest in certification for staff, but what we're increasingly seeing is that practices can't afford not to invest in their patients.
Certainly agree with you. Now let's take a look at each of the professions kind of as broken down at the individual level. We do see some variances in this particular data, and I think it's important to note that each patient is regulated differently. Traditionally, on the national level, we don't see or have any set standards for allied health education, training, or certification, so the demand is typically driven by the employers. Employers will often determine what the minimum requirements are for professions and then communicate that through their partners or their job postings. So we have one more way for you all to interact today. So our last audience poll, we'd like to ask you a question. What's the top skill that your frontline workers need to develop? We'll give you just a second to think about what specific qualities matter the most to you when you're looking to hire someone, or when you're looking for a teammate or somebody to work alongside you. Which of these do you feel is most critical? And Stacy will show us the results here in about 2 seconds. Here we go. All right, professionalism. Okay, I know that is something that we have been hearing for a number of years, that professionalism, work readiness, work skills is something that is key to individuals as they're going out to become hired. Nicole, what are your thoughts on this initial poll result?
Oh my gosh. I think the thing is that these are all important and that they really complement each other and overlap. So it does speak to the nature of the soft skills and how they're so interconnected to those hard skills.
All right, it's so great to get your guys' feedback of what you think was most important with this group of individuals, being professionalism and soft skills. With our overall research, you can kind of see that that was actually placed 4th on the list, and these are ranked in the terms of importance based on our employer and educator surveys. So clinical experience, and critical thinking being the top two, along with patient communication. Each of those three also, I think, help us understand the importance of externships, internships, and experiential learning, because all of that, really all of those, but I would say the first four really play a part in that being a really important part of their training. So here is another look at some soft skills that we feel like are essential in the workplace. We've received a ton of feedback and decided to dig just a little bit deeper into these specific areas and what specifically employers are looking for, but also what they're struggling to find. So after a lot of personal interviews, the list above shows you exactly what's really important to them, being active listening, nonverbal communication, patient communication and empathy, cultural sensitivity, and then just tone, pitch, and volume of communication. Nicole, have you seen these as areas of importance as well in the healthcare environment? Nicole, are you still with us?
Oh, I'm sorry, my phone disconnected. Could you please repeat that?
Yeah, no problem. We list the soft skills here that are really important to healthcare employers, and I was wondering, is this list similar to what you have heard from your readers?
Yes, definitely. And I think that speaks to the fact that they really all add up and they add on to each other and complement each other in different ways. So we know that patients aren't necessarily saying all the same things to everyone, especially not to the physician. So in an effort to really provide the best care possible and build, it's really important to build that patient relationship with among allied workforce staff, and then to develop that relationship between staff and the physician, so you can just try to find the best way to deliver the most respectful and the most appropriate care, taking into considerations of cultural sensitivity.
Perfect. Now, in a previous slide, we did mention that employers are really supporting certification for their employees. We wanted to look at how else are they helping individuals advance their careers or close the skills gap. And so here is a little bit of what they gave us in terms of ways that they're doing that. So for example, continuing education, offering CE courses, mentoring, coaching, internal work groups, and then of course career advancement or career laddering opportunities. Nicole, is this something that, is this list, do you feel like, the right things for employers to be doing to help support training and certification?
Yes, I think the important thing to remember is that it's an opportunity for everyone, and it can start with you no matter where you're at. So you can always be investing in your colleagues or in your employees, and just the idea overall that we can always be doing better. And doing better or doing more doesn't have to cost a lot of money, and it doesn't have to be really burdensome either. It can be really informal. It can just be a quick aside. And yes, it will cost a little bit, perhaps in your time or perhaps in continuing education resources. But I think the important thing to remember is that it's going to cost you more to hire and more to attract new talent, especially if you have a high turnover rate and are developing a reputation for not being a great place to work that supports your employees.
That's great insight. Thank you so much for that. Well, at NHA, we use this research in really insightful ways, and so from gathering those types of lists, NHA is also working and taking some responsibility to help bridge the gap for both employers and educators. So this is just a quick short list of some of the things that NHA, is doing to help in this particular situation. A lot of these will be listed in the resources section of additional information that you'll receive at the end of the webinar. For example, things about our new soft skills development product, some of the simulation learning resources and tools that we're using, so on and so forth. Great. Now we have kind of talked about all the research. Now we want to move into what's trending within the different generations that are working in your practices today. So let's take a first look at the different types of generations that make up the current workforce. Take a quick second. Which one are you? You don't have to formally answer that question, but are you a Gen Zer or a Millennial? I'm not sure if I need to give my age away by saying which one I am, but I'm going to say I am a Gen Xer, so I will be describing some of those attributes for myself and my fellow Gen Xers, but let's see how well this information fits with you and the different generation that you fit into. Big thing is more than 1 in 3 American labor force participants are Millennials, making them the largest generation in the U.S. labor force. So if you're Millennial, you're the big group out there. You might be thinking, how is this, knowing this information, how is it helpful in healthcare? Well, you work with everyone in your team or on your team, and every patient that you encounter comes from a specific generation as well. Each has a unique story, and an ability to have cultural sensitivity to those individuals is really key. Cultural competency is really a hot topic right now in the healthcare space, so that healthcare providers understand a person's unique experiences, their beliefs, their values, their background, their language, all of which plays a role in how we deliver that care to them. There's more on this in our recent issue of Access, so make sure you check that out as well after the webinar. All right, so let's look a little bit at each of these groups. So the baby boomers. By 2030, all baby boomers, that's a hard one to say, will be over the age of 65, and they will be transitioning from practitioners to patients. And this is creating an increased demand for allied health jobs. So as this generation moves into retirement age, they not only place a greater need and demand for healthcare services, but they have a higher expectation of care. So they've been caring for others throughout their career, and now they want the same high quality care delivered to them. Nicole, what are your thoughts about how these boomers are going to shape the expectations in healthcare?
Oh my gosh, they've changed just about everything else in our society, so we don't expect that to be any different for healthcare. But, there is a really strong recognition that they are upping the ante, and they're going to make providers and allied health professionals do more. There's higher demands, and meme culture often shows that boomers are even more demanding than millennials and Gen Zers, so contrary to popular belief. So they have high expectations.
Awesome. So the next in line is the Gen Xers. There are over 60% of the Gen Xers that have attended college and grew up as technology developed. They were early adopters of cell phones, the internet, early social media, but these things weren't consistent in every household, meaning the adoption rate could have varied depending on what part of the country that you lived in or just your beliefs, from your family. Generation X, we are called the middle child of generations. This generation was expected to contribute to the workforce in numbers totaling 65 million by 2018. We tend to be more ethically diverse and better educated and tend to be independent, resourceful, and self-sufficient, all of which play a vital role in the healthcare occupations. Now for millennials. Despite many persisting stereotypes of millennials, 91% believe that achieving success in their career is necessary to living a good life. So they are very focused on that career advancement and what their next move is. So if we look at specifically millennials in the workplace, 21% of them reported changing jobs in the past year, often due to poor work-life balance. So that's telling you as well what's really important to them is to have not only a successful and advancing career, but also to enjoy their workplace environment. They aren't afraid to move around. They also mark a shift in how we use technology to communicate. So the millennials are using their cell phones more, the texting, social media, to communicate with their peers. Nicole, as a millennial, what insights do you have to add to this?
So just a friendly reminder that Millennials and Gen Zers aren't that different from previous generations. But even more so, they are driven by meaning and purpose, even more than money, and that's a marked contrast to previous generations. And one great thing about healthcare is that it has that advantage built right in to its mission, its operation, and its purpose. So I think if you tap into that, you'll find it's a really easy way to attract fresh talent, and be able to harness these skills that Millennials and their younger peers and Gen Z have.
All right, so we went through in the workplace. So the next slide is, kind of define what the Millennials are, what they do, and how they're positioned in the workplace. But then as an employer, what are some key things that you would need to remember about this generation when either working alongside them, hiring them, or placing them amongst the team? They have a strong sense of purpose, as Nicole mentioned. They look for that kind of coaching and mentorship to help provide them the next step within their career pathways. And they really engage and have an importance around personal relationships and are experience-oriented. They want to try things. They want to see things and do things as they learn. Lastly, we have the Gen Z. In a recent survey, more than half of the Gen Z respondents said personal success is the most important thing in life, and becoming successful has little or nothing to do with luck. Gen Z is also becoming one of the most powerful consumer forces in the market, with an influence on nearly $44 billion in discretionary spending. And you might ask, why do I say that? Because they're also shopping and spending on healthcare services as well. So they have a huge impact on our healthcare professions and the services that we provide them. And of course, in even more of a way than the previous generation, they are socially and technically empowered by all sorts of means of technology. So as we look at them in the workplace, 92% are concerned about the generational gap that technology is causing in their professional and personal lives. I think this is a really interesting fact that they are actually understanding or could see a potential weakness within their own generation. So technology has been a part of their daily life. 37% express concern that the technology is weakening their ability to maintain strong interpersonal relationships and develop people skills, which may support your all's answer to the question earlier around professionalism and soft skills kind of being where the largest gap exists. Gen Z may need help understanding when different modes of communication are appropriate, and they expect that employers are giving them frequent and constructive feedback. Nicole, do you think that the give and take between technology and communication with Gen Z is going to have an impact in healthcare?
I think so, but I am actually pretty excited about this because I see the fact that Gen Zers use their cell phones as a real opportunity, and just edited a story about how text messages have almost a 99% open rate as compared to emails or even phones. So it's a potential to leverage technology to serve other generations for appointment reminders and for other kinds of customer service opportunities. And so I think the thing to remember is that Gen Zers who grew up around this technology can really drive the way that it's being used, especially at your organization. And so you might consider turning to them and say, hey, how do you use this? Or how could we be doing this better? Because I'm sure they have a lot of ideas. And they're the ones who might be considered driving it, but it's to the benefit of all.
I think that's a great point and way to be, positively thinking about that generation versus the opposite of the what ifs or what do we need to work on with this particular generation. Employers need to remember that as well. I think they need to capitalize on their technology strengths, as you mentioned, and remember to provide that ongoing feedback for communication advancement. It's also good to remember that Gen Z is risk averse. They are acceptable and open to diversity and authenticity as common values. They want to think about their workplace as being kind of their second family, and they do not view ethics as shades of gray. So they want to make good, strong, correct, and ethical decisions. So now to move into the last part of this presentation to talk about 3 allied health staffing and retention strategies. So what can we do to help retain these allied health professionals in their current positions or elevate them into others? And it really revolves around these 3 points: building a community between educators and employers. Building that community helps everyone place the right candidates in the right environment when those relationships are strong between educators and employers. Both parties have a say in how they're trained, and then also where they are placed or where the best fit is for them for employment. The second is providing career development opportunities. In the past, there has not always been clear paths identified for most of our allied health professions as there is with nurses and or physicians. So with more of a focus on career development and creating career ladders, allied health professionals may be more aware of what advanced skills training can help them with and can push them to land that next job or move up within the organization. And then lastly, allowing all generations to feel valued. Being able to work amongst individuals, multi-generational, is key because teamwork is such a main component of delivering quality patient-centered care. With that, we have to be able to communicate and work with individuals of all ages, all generations, et cetera. And knowing more about what each of those generations' expectations and traits are can only help make that process go better. So diving in a bit, so lessons learned when bridging communications between educators and employers. These are just some insights that NHA was hoping to be able to bring to the table because of our experience in this space. So professionalism is very important, but it's also tricky to teach, but we need to make sure we try and teach them anyway, whether it's in the classroom setting, the intern or externship setting, or even on the job. It's a continuous learning cycle. The big thing here is soft skills plays a major part of this. When we talk about professionalism and a lot of the attributes, we want to ensure that there are training resources available. So NHA will be coming out with and is in development stages of producing a soft skills training tool that will be available towards the end of this year, first of next year. And so we're very excited about that, and we'll be sharing information, more information with you, not only after this webinar, but as we get close to the release date of that particular product. We want to make sure you guys really look at forging those externship partnerships with your employers in your area, because again, it gives them a path towards employment. They have a pool of applicants to choose from, and you get the feedback that you need on what you need to do within your program to make that better. And then both educators and employers need to help allied health professionals understand the value of certification. Everyone plays a role in helping new allied health professionals get involved and engaged into their professions, and certification is certainly one way to do this, even when it's not required. Next, we have gotten feedback around career development opportunities. So feedback is a gift. Start career development conversations early. Uncover where those opportunities for growth are. You can use things like assessment-based certificate programs or additional continuing education or adding responsibilities to employees to ensure that they're working at the top of their credential. We also can look at continuing education or CE more broadly. So are there local opportunities that individuals can do? How can you help them network? Are there interactive and online methods that you can look at for gaining CE that can help accommodate their work-life balance? We all know we're busy and you can't do it, when you get home. So are there opportunities to give time back while they're working to do career development or advancement? Nicole, do you feel like professional development is a differentiator with employees and employers?
Yeah, and I think about it this way. So like when you get out of bed in the morning, whether you're 22 or 62, you want to feel like you're making a difference and that you're growing and you're not just stagnant and punching in and punching out. And I'd even go so far as to say that it's perhaps even more important for that development for a 22-year-old, because we want them to stay in the field for the next 30 years. We don't want to drive them away. And there's a statistic that says more than 65% of young workers say they need frequent feedback from their supervisor to stay at their job. So there's definitely a need, and but even more than the need is the opportunity. So they want to make a difference. They crave feedback. So why shouldn't we find ways to give that to them and to help them grow and continuously learn?
That's great. Thanks so much for that insight. So a couple of examples that NHA has for career development opportunities that we won't hit on too much here, but again, this information will be available for you after the webinar, or certainly at any point you can reach out to us to learn more. We have a couple of assessment-based certificate programs, one of which is the Principles of Health Coaching. And what this does is it provides fundamental skills for care team members to look at how they can better communicate and increase patient engagement with their patients, specifically around individuals that are suffering from chronic diseases, and how can they how can we encourage them to make healthy life changes in order to support their wellness track. A key component of this is a virtual simulation that we have embedded into the product that really focuses around the philosophy of motivational interviewing and giving allied health professionals the tools that they need to be able to communicate and motivate individuals towards that healthy lifestyle. Next is TeamBased Care. This helps a healthcare team through the transition of moving towards a team-based care or a patient-centered or a care-coordinated environment, and helps expand their roles and streamline communication so that all team members talk the same language and are working to the top of their credential. You could also use this as an onboarding tool as you welcome new members into your practices if you're already working in a team-based care environment. And lastly, so all generations do have some similarities. So they all value things like effective leadership. All generations want leadership that they can respect and trust, appreciation and recognition. The type and frequency may vary within each generation as to what they want, but all employees want to know that their hard work, dedication, and skills are valued, appreciated, recognized, and rewarded. Overall work-life balance, everyone's busy and everyone wants to spend time with family and friends. We need that time to kind of reset and recharge so that we can deliver the best care to our patients every day. And then lastly, opportunity for reaching financial goals. We want to be successful and have the ability to pay off our loans, contribute to retirement and savings plans, save for our children's education, and whatever. So that is a key component of us working and being successful as an allied health professional as well. So that does it for us today in kind of covering some industry trends based on NHA's research, looking at the generational differences, and then also how to train and maintain or retain your allied health professionals. And I think I may turn it back over to Stacy right now. We have some time for some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica and Nicole. Great information. We're really hoping that in these next few minutes we can answer some of your questions. You can direct them at either Jessica or Nicole, or if you would love to hear both of their perspective, I'm sure that they would love to share that with you. So if you have questions, if you would just type those in the chat, that would be fantastic. I do have a question that I want to start with that we actually got before the webinar as everyone was registering. So Jessica and Nicole, when our employers are making these hiring decisions, what do you feel is more important? Do you feel it's the soft skills, or do you feel it's the technical skills? And how should employers navigate those waters if they find someone who on both sides of the fence, someone who's really strong at those soft skills and being, a great patient advocate and patient communicator, Or can you teach them the technical skills, or can you work backwards? Do you find those people that have the great technical skills, and how can we help to educate around soft skills?
So this is Nicole. Google actually did a study about this, and they found that based on like their application process, which is really rigorous, and their talent pool, which is, you know, over the top, that the most important skills were those soft skills. And I think it just goes back to this idea that I've learned from a few managers, that they'll actually carry their business cards, or they will approach someone who is providing excellent customer service in a different capacity. So I've known great managers who used to be like an assistant manager at, say, a grocery store, or who was really good and calm under pressure at a retail or entertainment position, because the idea is that you can teach the skills, but you can't teach the personality. And I know there's conflicting thoughts about this, but I guess think about the last time that you had a really bad experience with customer service in any capacity, and then think about a really good experience you had. And if you could create good experiences on a consistent basis for your patients, then it seems like no-brainer. So that would require an upfront commitment of technical skills, but the rewards would be higher patient satisfaction and, you know, potentially better care.
Nicole, I think you're exactly right. I think one area, you know, to support that is why NHA has been hearing for a number of years the need for a professionalism or soft skills training tool, which goes to the point that you were exactly making, is, you know, that one is a little bit harder to assess and work at, not necessarily teaching, but more so upskilling or understanding those traits. So I think NHA coming out with that tool is going to be a great opportunity to embed some of that into our educational programs. We know our educational programs focus a lot on the skills, and we hear that they come out with good clinical skills, but need maybe some upskilling in the professionalism or soft skills piece as well. So I think we'll get to the point where, you know, they're coming out and being more well-rounded and more desirable for employers in the future. We had one quick question in here about, is team-based care and the communication or principles of health coaching piece a piece course or part of a full certification for NHA? It is not. It will not be one of our accredited certifications. Certifications are typically focused on a profession as a whole and the knowledge and skills needed to perform at an entry level at a specific profession. These are more skill specific, so they are what we call assessment-based certificate programs, which means they have to work through the content, and throughout the training they'll be assessed or tested on each module's competencies. And then they progress through each module until they get to the end, and then they will have an overall assessment as well. And they would earn a certificate, not a certification. So hopefully that answers that. Trying to see if there's any other. The slides will be available to everyone. Stacy will make sure that we provide the resources after the webinar.
We have another question that came in. So this is from someone who is an RN at a high school or clinical instructor. She says, we have clinical rotations in a hospital setting, which is great, but I'd like advice on establishing externships after graduation. Would either of you have anything to offer there? I know I will just say one of the things that we have found that can help facilitate these connections is that outreach to local employers and really building that community between your education institution and your employer. And I know this is a question from a high school, but if there are community colleges on the line, there's really access and leverage your career services department to help start to build some of those relationships. Jessica, Nicole, do you guys have any advice on externships?
I don't know if that's something, Nicole, that I don't know that physicians practice really focuses on that. That's more on the education space. You know, all we can do at NHA is help to facilitate those relationships, because we do know how key they are for local education programs or institutions to seek out those community employer partners and really work together to find ways to collaborate, whether that's through just shadowing or getting them in to do an internship or externship. It really does take both sides of the line, both, you know, the technical and the experiential and the soft skills development for us to produce successful individuals and to reduce that turnover. So working through your career services department, work through your workforce development, local workforce development board, you know, attending job fairs of the large employers or healthcare organizations in your area often helps foster those relationships as well. I know one of our directors has really been focused on this particularly, and she just posted another LinkedIn article out there about what she has learned from conducting 200 hours worth of what we're calling our collaboration lunches.
We will include that in our resources.
Perfect. So I think that can also provide some insight to the group as well.
The only thing I can add from a personal experience is that in grad school, we had a lot of adjunct instructors who were practicing in the field, and they often would be in a position to hear either from, say, their employer or another colleague in the field, or any associations that they belong to. If they heard of opportunities, they would pass that message along. But, you know, the adjunct professors also became a great advocate in trying to get people in based on, you know, their relationship with students to find opportunities for them. So if that's not something that, you know, you might already have and might just need to take more advantage of.
Awesome, thank you. We also want to make a note that some of the items that we listed or products that we listed in the presentation today, like the Principles of Health Coaching and TeamBased Care, are available for continuing education credit for NHA cert holders. But then both of those products have also been awarded AMCC credit for nurses as well, so they can use that for CE on the nursing side, as well as on the allied health side, in case anybody was wondering.
We have another question. Does anyone have any insights about the variance in our generations for the type of recognition that they desire and the type of recognition that they receive?
You know, I'll just make a quick comment. I think recognition type is very person by person. However, boomers and Gen X's tend to prefer a more structured review process to get feedback, both on the positive and negative side. Millennials and Gen Z want to have more ongoing feedback. So instead of just at the midterm or the end of year, they want to kind of do it maybe on weekly one-on-ones or, you know, quarterly, because they want to know when they are succeeding and when they're not, and when they need to improve or make changes.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to note that a lot of times recognition is a very personal thing, and some people like to be rewarded with a lunch, and some people like to be rewarded very quietly with a handwritten note. They don't want a lot of attention drawn to them, and some people like to be rewarded and recognized in front of a team. And so I'm not sure that's necessarily a generational thing. I think that's a personal preference, and I would encourage everyone to ask their employees that question so that you know that you aren't going to embarrass someone if they've done a really fantastic job and you announce it at a team meeting. Some people, it may make them extremely uncomfortable. So I would definitely recommend everyone asking the question, but I don't think that it is anything that you can ladder up to the generation that they fall into. I think kind of what Jessica was going back to, it's really that feedback and those things that are really not recognition, that are really just coaching your employees and continuing to develop them, that may tie a little bit more closely into generational preferences. I know.
Just to add.
Sorry, go ahead, Nicole.
Just real quickly to add, is there a way that you could do multiple things? So if there's an opportunity at a meeting to highlight, to make it kind of a program of the week, a special of the week, and maybe you could get buy-in that way. I don't think anyone would be opposed to a nice note or just a compliment one-on-one. But I also know that people, really like food. So what if you brought in cupcakes for the whole team? Or what if you had like a small gift card to Starbucks? Like, are there multiple things that you could do at different levels to recognize different kinds of accomplishments and goal setting, personal versus team-based? I just like to think that it doesn't cost you anything to be kind no matter what. So it doesn't have to, there doesn't have to be an external reward. And maybe this is just something that I know managers will often put a note to themselves in a file every time that someone does something really good, and they usually, they can tell the employee at the time, but also write a note so that way it can be incorporated into that more structured review process.
I think we have time for one or two more questions. If anyone has some additional questions, to type into the chat.
There was a lot of request for a soft skills rubric, and when we talked about the soft skills training tool or resource that's coming out, it is much more in-depth than just a rubric that can be used on individual exercises. There's actually a specific philosophy that's going to be used and explained in teaching and delivering this training in a specific way. So we don't have a rubric per se that we will be able to share, but I'm assuming we will have information out that really describes the design of this product and how it can be delivered to students and the associated outcomes that we're wanting to achieve. Because I know a lot of you were asking for a soft skills rubric.
I am not seeing any additional questions. Again, we are going to share some more information about the products that we talked about in our post-webinar resources. So you will be getting an email within 24 hours that will give you a link to the recording, our webinar slides, and then some other things that we've talked about today. I don't have any other additional information to share. I know on behalf of NHA and on behalf of Physicians Practice, Jessica and Nicole, thank you to everyone for joining us this afternoon. We really appreciate you giving up an hour of your time. We hope that you found it helpful. If there's any other comments that you would like to share in the chat on ways that we could improve, or something that you would like more information, or something that we didn't cover, we would definitely welcome that feedback. And we hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.